Here we go!
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another podcast on MMA Unhinged. This weekend, we have UFC back, and we've got a middleweight main event on show. Jared Cannonier versus Gregory Robocop Rodriguez. Should be a good one in the middleweight division. I'm looking forward to it. 2 top 15 middleweights going in action. But firstly, before we get into all that good stuff, I'm going to go over to Oscar. Shoot over to you. How are you?
I'm feeling good. We are finally back, and this is exactly the kind of thing I like to come to when we have a pretty good card to recap, and we have another good card to preview, because sometimes the UFC takes weeks off here and there, but this time around, they have a nice extended schedule for us. They're keeping us well fed, and there's so much to look forward to on that UFC calendar.
Yeah, absolutely. What you just said there, they're keeping us well fed. We are hungry UFC fans. Sometimes I'm disappointed, when we head to the Apex, but I feel like it's been a while since we've been to the Apex, so I guess we can kind of put up for it for every now and then. But I still hate it. I still don't want to see the Apex in 2025. It's not what I'm looking forward to, but I'm looking forward to the main event. Should be good. But firstly, Oscar, let's speak about what happened on the weekend. UFC went down to Australia, down under. See what I've done there? Went down under to Australia, and they had a pay-per-view there in which it wasn't the most stacked of pay-per-view. I mean, the fight night a week before that was sort of more of a pay-per-view card and a much better stacked card than the pay-per-view that they had in Australia. And I kind of felt bad for the Australian fans. Let's talk about it, Oscar. Dricus du Plessis in a main event against Sean Strickland, and I've got to be brutally honest, I kind of don't want to see Sean Strickland talk before a fight ever again, because I feel like he's ruining it for himself. He talks a massive game. I'll quickly scroll this up so you can see the results. We're going to go to the death. We're going to go to the war. There's going to be blood spilled on the canvas. And then I feel like what we get is a completely different Sean Strickland in the octagon. It's more of a jab and move, looking to kind of just do that for 5 rounds, in which a style against Dricus du Plessis, who's looking to throw some bombs, looking to throw some strikes and make the action and kind of work, which I think is set up for a terrible fight. I told you before we went on air, I think it was the second round of this fight, I fell asleep in my chair. And I feel like that adds up. Obviously, the co-main event wasn't, the most exciting either. Plus, it was like 6 a.m. in the morning for myself, and I just absolutely passed out. And I watched it back in the morning. I just felt to myself like maybe I was lucky to fall asleep. It wasn't that bad. But Oscar, your honest thoughts and overall thoughts on Dricus du Plessis getting, unanimous decision, dominant. Pretty much every scorecard was 50-45.
Well, this was a rematch that had a rare scenario where I'm picking the guy that I believed won the first time. I thought Sean won the first fight. But in this rematch, heading into it, Sean Strickland not only is suffering from a staph infection, but he has explicitly stated that he's not going to change the way he fights. So there's no reason to pick a guy who's going to go in there with an insane mindset, which is doing the same thing twice and expecting the same result. And also, you have to factor in that Dricus du Plessis himself was open to making the adjustments, and those adjustments he made. Sure, he didn't change his style completely, but he knew that he had to walk forward at all costs, and that was what was going to shut down Sean, who's not going to fire back at all times. Sean looked off in every way. I'm sure that staph infection played a factor here, but at the end of the day, his coach, Eric Nixick, was telling him, hey, you got to go for it. You have to get some respect from Dricus. He never got that respect. The whole time he was backing up, doing the same jab keep that he's criticized for. That combo has now put him in this boy who called wolf scenario where nobody believes him the second time around when he says he's going to go to war. He just got beat up brutally. When he got his nose broken, that's when I knew he had absolutely zero chance, because that was truly bothering him. And Dricus kept on marching forward. He showed that he was the much better fighter today. And now it looks like he's setting himself up to fight Khamzat Chimaev next. And that fight, if he were to win, honestly, you could put him up there with one of the middleweight greats.
Absolutely agree. Dricus doing some fantastic stuff in the middleweight division. We've got another middleweight main event this weekend, but we'll get to that eventually down the road. But yeah, Dricus du Plessis getting the job done against Sean Strickland in a fashion. What was was it the greatest of viewing for myself? It was hard to watch, especially at that time in the morning. I watched it back after, and I just felt like it wasn't the greatest. But yeah, I'm excited to see what's next for Dricus. Most likely, it will be Khamzat Chimaev, and I feel like that will definitely play out a different way, especially with the intensity that Khamzat Chimaev brings and actually delivers on the night. I feel like if he says he's going to bring us something, I think Khamzat actually brings that sort of intensity, and he might only last 10 minutes because of the pace he brings, but it's going to deliver a fantastic fight either way. In the co-main event, it was Weili versus Tatiana Suarez. If you asked me last week, and we had a show last week, who I thought was going to win this, I thought I was heavily on the back of Tatiana Suarez. I thought she should have been or could have been champion 3 years ago. Since she entered the division, everyone took a liking to her. Tough final winner. She was the talent that everyone was looking forward to, and everyone was excited to see what happens when she gets that title shot. She fought Weili, who I thought, fair enough, she had some good striking. She's very technical with it, but the wrestling, I thought Tatiana Suarez was just going to be able to outmatch her with her pedigree and her experience in that department. I felt like it was going to be too much for Weili. Yeah, did she prove me wrong? Weili went in there and kind of proved to me that she is a legit champion. She has come leaps and bounds since her loss against Rose Namajunas. I think she's complete. I think she's got every asset to kind of be a really hard worthy champion. I think she's going to hold this belt for a few more fights. I know there's talks of her going up to fight Valentina Shevchenko, and I love every idea of that. I think she deserves it. I think she's a big star, and beat Tatiana Suarez, who I thought was a big favorite heading into this fight. Oscar, your thoughts on this one? Weili defending the belt once again in truly spectacular fashion.
Yeah, Zhang Weili exceeded every expectation we had for her completed skill set. We know she was a great striker. We have seen her excel in the grappling before. She won the title against a wrestler in Carla Esparza by submitting her. But this time around, she showed what she was capable of against a high-level wrestler, which Carla Esparza, she does have great wrestling, but for being honest, she was always undersized for the division, so she was meeting her physical match. If you looked at them in the face-offs, they were about the same size, which actually surprised me. I thought since Tatiana is such a physical force, it would be an advantage for her. It was not. Zhang Weili just super physical in there, and sure, she got taken down early, but after that, she was able to counter wrestle her the whole fight, and on the feet, she was stinging her big time with those big punches. It's just not a competitive fight in any way outside of round one. And yeah, it totally wasn't that entertaining to watch because of how much Tatiana was shut down. And for Tatiana, I don't think a division with Zhang Weili in it, she does not win the title. But hey, good news for her. Zhang Weili is going to leave the division. She said she wants this to be her last fight in the weight class. So I think Zhang Weili moves up, win or lose. She stays in that weight class. And I think Tatiana can still be champion.
Absolutely agree. I'm looking forward to see what happens next with Weili. I think the UFC will push hard now for that Valentina Shevchenko fight. I think she deserves it. I'd love to see her maybe defend maybe a belt on her home turf in China, in front of her home fans, and a big crowd in front of her people. I think that would be a great one for Weili. I think she deserves it. It should be one on the UFC list. I know Dana White, as you mentioned before we went on air, has talked about that, and hopefully they push that. I feel like the next bit, we're obviously going to recap, but we're going to talk about the big moments, but we can't skip Talison Teixeira. went in there against Justin Taffer in 35 seconds, Oscar, and kind of put that Australian man away. It was quite brutal. Elbows, knees up against the clinch, up against the fence as well, sorry, and kind of finished Justin Taffer. The size and the frame of Taliesin at 265 pounds. It's good to see a good fresh heavyweight prospect in the division. Could cause some problems maybe down the line.
Yeah, I totally think that this guy is one of the few true behemoths in this division with that 6'7" height, I believe it is. Justin Taffa, he's one of these guys that we see is pretty overweight. He's got a belly to him, but he does hit hard. But in terms of his physicality, especially in like the clinch or in grappling, he's going to be at a serious disadvantage. And with the reach disadvantage in this fight, it was very easy for Taliesin to land a big elbow and for Taffa to fall over and get finished quite easily. I knew this was going to be a quick knockout for Teixeira, but 35 seconds, he really exceeded my expectations there with that quick finish. And now he has set himself up, in my opinion, with the state of the heavyweight division. They just cut Jairzinho Rozenstruik. I feel like it's wide open, honestly. Any guy can just get a top 10 fight pretty quick. So he might be a guy that could really make a name for himself very quickly.
I was about to say maybe the UFC match him up with Andre Arlovski next, but obviously he's gone out of the division, out of the heavyweight division. I mean, if Andre was still in the division in the UFC, it would have made a ton of sense because you have to get through that sort of fight to get to the top. But yeah, Taliesin, a fantastic prospect. I'm looking forward to see how he plays out inside the UFC. Jimmy Crute returned after a bit of a hiatus and got a draw. His last 5 fights have been a bit of a weird scenario. 2 draws, obviously a few losses. But talk to me about the rest of the card. Gabriel Santos, he got a rear naked choke of Jack Jenkins. But the one that impressed me as well. Obviously, we had the brother of Ilia Topuria, Alexandra Topuria. He came in and made a bit of a name for himself in there.
I really think Alexandra Topuria has many of the physical talents that Topuria has, but he just doesn't put it together as well as Ilia does. And also he had that little period where he was retired, like 6 years he was retired. So not exactly taking the sport as seriously as Ilia. Also, you have to factor in he's the older brother here. But usually with these siblings, you always have a sibling that is a little less talented than the other. That's just how it is. And it was pretty evident here. I thought Colby Thickness was actually going to win this fight because he was more proven, but you see the natural talent of Topuria shine through. He was able to use the wrestling to dominate rounds 2 and 3. And he's a guy that I think is going to stick around a long time if the UFC matches him up reasonably.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's I know they're brothers, but sometimes you might get different fighting styles. I know I've seen it with Nick and Nate. That was quite similar. But Alexandra and Ilia, it was like a copy and paste almost, sort of. I know Ilia's a bit more sharper, a bit more quicker with the feet and head movement, but literally a copy and paste. It was quite phenomenal to see Alexandra at work. It was great. It was great. It was a great showing for himself as well, and he got the job done. Another one, as you can see at the bottom there, it was the first fight of the evening. A knockout within 19 seconds. A peach of a shot, put him down. A lot of people looked at the stoppage and thought maybe it was early, but I thought it was a pretty good stoppage. I think I agreed with Refa. I thought there was nothing else to be shown there. I think the fight was won. And I think I've just lost Oscar there, so that's a bit awkward as I'm asking a question. But yeah, I thought it was a great stoppage from the ref, to be honest. I completely agree. I think it was a peach of a shot from Quillen, and he put his man down, and eventually, the referee did wave off the fight. But I have no protest. I thought it was a great stoppage, and I like what I've seen. And we had a great fight between Jonathan McAfee as well and Kevin Duciet. That was a great one. But throwing back to Oscar now as he's joined again. Oscar, I just quickly talked about the first fight of the evening, which was a fantastic fight that kind of kicked off the evening. Quillen, 19 seconds, hit his man with a great shot, knocked down Anshul Jubilee. Thoughts on a stoppage? Have we lost him again?
I thought it was the first stoppage. Anshel Jubilee had a very high opinion of himself heading into the UFC. He said that he thought he was an equal to Habib. And yeah, he's eating his words right now. People are destroying him online. And if we're being quite honest, rightfully so. If you're going to talk that game similar to that as Sean Strickland, you better back it up. So far, he's had a very terrible outing in the UFC. Some kind of phobia to dogs because he got knocked out after his opponent started barking at him. I would not be surprised if he's cut after this knockout.
Absolutely. Let's get into the rest of the card. As I mentioned, not too much going on other than that. Oscar, was you impressed with anyone else out there? I know there was a lot of decisions, not too many finishes. I know Gabriel Santos went in there and got his job done in rear naked choke against Jack Jenkins. But anyone else that impressed you before we move on to UFC this weekend? I think the delay's a little bit slow, guys. I do apologize. If not, I've just lost Oscar. This is what happens. We're running a podcast. Unfortunately, he lives in America. I'm in England. Unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't really go our way. But yeah, we'll move straight over to UFC Fight Night. Jared Cannonier and Robocop Gregory Rodriguez. This weekend, we're back in the Apex, as I mentioned before. It's a bit awkward now. But yeah, before Jared Cannonier in the main event against Gregory Rodriguez at 185 pounds in what I think is a great fight at middleweight. I'm looking forward to this. Obviously, Jared Cannonier, former title challenger, Gregory Robocop Rodriguez in his first main event, which is interesting. He's been in some fantastic fights. Everyone knows, everyone remembers that great cut, gnarly cut, split right in the middle of his head after suffering a knee, I think it was, against Chidrin Jukwani. I think it was as well. I think it was. I'm pretty sure it was. So Jared Cannonier, Gregory Rodriguez, for me, I feel like I'm in the side that are giving the Brazilian Robocop, younger, more fresher man. Jared Cannonier, 40 years of age. You know what they say, the last thing that a fighter loses is power. And I don't think Jared Cannonier is going to be able that's the last thing that he's going to lose is his power. And we know that he has that in abundance. He can knock people out with, a few shots, maybe one shot. Greg Rodriguez, if you look at his track record, has suffered a few knockouts in the past. And that is a little bit daunting, especially if you're a bettor. And if you're looking at this, obviously got knocked out in the 10 series, got knocked out a few times, a few fights back prior, which was against Bruno Ferreira with that counter left, if you remember. But since then, 3 fights back to back against Tennis Tululin, Brad Tavares, and obviously his last fight against Christian Leroy Duncan, where he beat that man. Beat Christian by unanimous decision, and now he takes on Jared Cannonier in his first main event of his career in the UFC. Oscar, I talked about but I'm going with Gregory Rodriguez. I also talked about the last thing that a fighter loses when it comes with age is power. Do you think Jared Cannonier can land his power against Robocop?
Yeah, I really think there's for sure a world where we see Jared Cannonier get a knockout in the first round, and it's not even competitive because Gregory Rodriguez has always been a guy that I saw as a great talent, a great physical force, but the durability is just not there at all times. If you look at his whole career, he gets knocked out by Bruno Lopez before he even enters the UFC. He goes on Contender Series hoping to get into the UFC. He runs into a guy that is not supposed to be a middleweight, a welterweight named Jordan Williams, who just never had a good run in the UFC. He lost all of his fights, I think. And to get knocked out by those two guys. And then in the UFC, he fights Bruno Ferreira, who is an absolute Hulk. but he gets knocked out in round 1 of that fight as well. I think that was early 2023. So there's been so many instances in his career where he may be the better fighter, but it doesn't matter. He gets caught with his hands down. So I just can't trust him in any way, shape, or form. He's going to destroy these low-level, unranked middleweights, but you put him in there with somebody as good as Jared Cannonier, it's going to be problems for him. And let's not forget, with the Jared Cannonier, last 2 fights were Caio Borralho, Nasruddin Imavov, who are 2 of the shiniest stars right now in the middleweight division, both in the top 5, I think. Those guys are legit. For Robocop, he's a little older. Well, older looking. He's actually not that old, but if you look at him, he just looks like he has a lot of miles on him. And that durability is also that of an older man. So I just don't see the longevity for Robocop like those other guys. Cannonier, nope. Sure, he's got that durability to be questioned, but I think he's just way better on the feet here, and he's going to land first and knock out Robocop in round 1.
Yeah, and you're going with Jared Cannonier in this spot. I'm going with Robocop. I think he gets the job done. I'm excited to see him in his first main event. I think he brings the action. He brings the excitement. Jared Cannonier, as I talked about before, Oscar, I put it over to Oscar, 40 years of age. The last thing that does go is the power, they say. Obviously he has that power when he can and you can knock out Gregory 100%. We've seen Gregory knocked out in the past quite a few times, as I talked about. But I think I'm going to go with. I think he's going to bring the pressure. He's going to bring, and I feel like the wrestling as well. I know Jared Cannonier, he's a big, strong guy. He's a physical specimen. But I think Gregory Rodriguez is going to be able to have that, the advantage in the department of the wrestling and the grappling as well. I feel like maybe can hold him down for a few rounds and potentially get, just wear him out. I think with these big guys, you've got to try and wear them out and try and take over late with the late stages. And maybe that's a tactic that Gregory Rodriguez could deploy, or maybe he could fall in love with a little bit of a dog fight. And then that's where obviously Jared Cannonier can potentially, sort of clip him. But I like this for Greg Rodriguez. I think he has a big spot for himself. He's younger. He's got the height advantage. I think he's going to go in there. I think we're going to see a good fight this weekend. I don't think we're going to see a knockout, but I feel like I'm hoping we see a dog fight. But if Jared Cannonier loses this, 3-fight skid, 40 years of age could be, make or break this one potentially, Oscar.
Certainly for Jared Cannonier. We felt that the reason why people were so mad when he got knocked out by Imavov and it was like an early stoppage, they were kind of mad because Cannonier was a guy that could have been in the title picture. Remember, he fought Adesanya for the title in 2022. He beats Sean Strickland a couple months after, which is about a year before Strickland wins the title. So we felt that he had the skill set necessary to compete with the best of them. But as I said, obviously with that age, it's letting him down. But as for his grappling defense, he's shown that he's great at it many times. He fought Derek Brunson, was able to get up from those takedowns. When he fought Jack Hermanson, never got taken down, knocked him out. David Branch, talented grappler back in the day, knocked him out. He can get up and inflict damage. So that's what I'm hoping he does. And we see a vintage killer gorilla out there.
Absolutely. It would be great to see, obviously, Jared Cannonier get it done, but I'm rooting for Gregory Rodriguez. In my head, it says he gets it done, but obviously my heart would like to see Jared Cannonier go out there and sort of implement his will and get the job done. Next one, a co-main event, which is a interesting one. I feel like if we said this was going to happen a few years ago, I'd be like Yusuf Salau back in the UFC after his run. He's done well to kind of pull it back and claw himself back into contention inside the UFC because he's in a co-main event spot against Calvin Kattar, former obviously UFC title challenger, I do believe. Fought obviously Max Holloway. Obviously everyone knows the story of what happened in that fight. Best boxer inside the UFC. Obviously fought Zabit, Josh Emmett, Arnold Allen. He is on a 3-fight losing streak. He is fighting Yusuf Salau. According to Tapology, is a heavy favorite, and I do like that spot for Yusuf Salau. For me, Calvin Kattar on the end of his career, not looking too great in the last few fights. I don't really see how Calvin Kattar can win this fight. Yusuf Salau, since he came back into the UFC, is kind of rejuvenated himself. Look, I think he's looked great. And really showed a different side of his game. His boxing looking great. Obviously, his grappling's looking great. He's a heavy favorite, and I like that. I think he should be the heavy favorite. But if Calvin Kattar goes in there and wins, fair play to him. He's in a tough spot. We talked about Jared Cannonier being on a 2-fight, 3-fight losing streak, make or break. Maybe this is Calvin Kattar, a guy from, I believe he's from Boston. Well, the Boston finisher. A guy from Boston. If there is a guy that's got heart, it's probably Calvin Kattar, and he probably needs to get it done this weekend to kind of save his job.
For Calvin Kattar, he's being counted out this weekend in many ways, and it's because of the Aljamain Sterling fight. That fight was a horrible outing for him. He got nothing into that fight. It was domination from Sterling. Even on the feet, Sterling had his way with him. So I didn't like that performance from Kattar, especially considering he's on the older side, so there's not much time to improve. But one thing I will have to factor in, he went to Canada with Rob Font, and Rob Font looked great in his last fight. Another fight where he was an underdog, and he was able to look well in terms of the wrestling defense. That's what he needs to win this fight against Youssef Zalal. But for Zalal, his last win, it really looked good in the moment. Doesn't look that good now because Jack Shore retired right after that fight. So it makes you wonder just how into the fight Jack Shore was. Before that, he fights Billy Quarantillo, who's a talented grappler, but another guy who kind of lost his way. So Youssef Zalal, he does look really good right now, but you have to wonder if Calvin Kattar will have one of those classic veteran performances where he goes out there and beats him. So I'm going to be bold right now, and I'm going to pick Calvin Kattar to win this fight by split decision. I think he stuffs enough takedowns and wins the striking exchanges and reminds people why he's here.
If you fast forward, but if you kind of rewind a few years back when when Calvin Kattar was beating Jeremy Stevens, Danny Ige, he was the man, beating, knocking out Ricardo Ramos. He had some great fights. Everyone was in love with his boxing, but I feel like maybe he got found out. I think maybe time could have caught up with him a little bit. 3-fight losing skid now. Big moment for him this weekend. The Boston finisher looking to get back to winning ways and potentially, keep his run alive and obviously the UFC dream alive. Next one, we've got Edmund Shabazian, who another one. Fast forward maybe a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago, was the one looking to go to the top and potentially go on and win a UFC championship. That's after he absolutely obliterates Brad Tavares, and then he ran into a man called Blonde Brunson, sort of ruined all the confidence, the momentum, and since then it's been quite a downward spiral of losing to Jack Manson and Nassourdine Imavov, who obviously both in their own right have been, Nassourdine Imavov just knocked out Adesanya, so there's no shame in that one. But he's coming off a loss against Jared Mershaw where he got arm trial choke in round number 2. He takes on Dylan Budka, who is 7-4. The American looks to come into this one to kind of get a win inside the UFC. He's lost against Andre Petrowski and Cesar Almeida. 2 losses back to back. In his last one, wasn't pretty. Oscar, who have you got in this one? Edmund Shabazian or Dylan Budka?
I just think Dylan Budka is not a UFC level fighter. He's shown it at so many instances. His Contender Series fight is one of the worst fights I've seen in the history of the Contender Series. That was a fight where he only got takedowns, never did a single thing with the takedown, and Dana White was feeling generous on the night, so he gave him a contract. My opinion, he should not have been given that contract. I think he made his debut like in 2021 or 2022, so he has very little experience. He had a ton of amateur fights, but they were like in about a year span. Edmund Shabazian, on the other hand, we looked at him like this rookie back in 2019. He's not that rookie anymore. He's, in my opinion, a finished product. And that finished product really can't fight too well outside of the first round. But in my opinion, it's not going to matter here because Dylan Budka, his striking defense is quite poor. he leaves openings all the time. When he fought Cesar Almeida was struggling in the grappling, and a couple Travis Brown style elbows later, he's fallen over and the fight is stopped. So I believe Edmund Shabazian has the grappling defense early to defend, and I think he lands one of those great head kicks and finishes the job. I just don't see these guys on the same level whatsoever. If you remember Edmund, he was in the top 15. Dylan Budka, I don't think he ever cracks the top 30 of the middleweight division.
Absolutely agree. Edmund Shabazian back in the day, obviously beating Brad Tavares, as I talked about, and I like Edmund Shabazian in this position. I think he gets the job done. Bit of a weird career that Edmund Shabazian has had. Obviously, touted as the one, and sort of had that, that ricochet of going from 100 to 0 real quick. Interested to see how he bounced back once again after losing to Gerald Meerschaert. Still incredibly only 27 years old. Still a lot to come from Edmund Shabazian, hopefully in the future. But I think he gets the job done, and I pretty much agree with everything you're saying. Dylan, unfortunately, not necessarily UFC caliber, and I think that puts the test this weekend. We see that happen. Next one, we've got Ismail Bonfim versus Nassim Sadykhov. That's an interesting one to say.
Yeah.
Nassim versus Ismail Bonfim. This one, Ismail Bonfim, obviously 20-4. The Brazilian is looking to continue momentum following that victory against Vince Pichel. He lost against Benoit St. Denis, but that was his only loss inside the UFC. Other than that, it's 2-1. He takes on Nassim. Oscar, who have we got in this one? Are we going for the Brazilian or are we going for Nassim?
I think this is a very tough fight for Nazim. Nazim has had a very fortunate UFC run so far. He's had a very, I would say, winnable fights. And there's been moments in a lot of these fights where he has struggled. If you look at the first fight he had against Evan Elder, he wins that fight on a cut stoppage. But if you ask me, he was down on the scorecards heading into that. So I wouldn't say he got lucky there, but I would say he for sure was challenged. And the Terrence McKinney fight, he actually did look really good in that. He was able to get a submission, which is not easy to do against Terrence McKinney. Usually guys knock him out early, but submitting Terrence McKinney, that for sure was quite surprising to people. And then the Vyacheslav Borchov draw. I don't know if people have seen that one. It was on the prelims a couple of years ago in Madison Square Garden. One of the most underrated fights in recent memory. That one really was incredible to watch. And it was incredible to watch because in round 2, Nazim got a 10-8 with a head kick and almost stopped the fight. But rounds 1 and 3, he's getting pieced up. So he's very hittable. And to be short and sweet here, it's just going to be Bonfim being the more technical fighter out there. And also, he has superior grappling. So you have to factor that in. He could get some control time if need be. But on the feet, I think he's a little cleaner. And he has learned to pace himself better as of late, because a big issue with the Bonfim brothers is they ran out of gas and got finished. But I think they've learned their lesson, and I expect him to win this fight and give Nazim his first loss.
Yeah, should be a good one. And I like this as well, position for Bonfim. 20-4 prospect for out of Brazil. Showed some great stuff since being inside the UFC. Obviously, that lost against Benoit, but no shame in that one. Benoit, top 10, top 15 fighter inside the UFC. Next one, we got Rodolfo Vieira versus Andre Petrowski. And every time I think about Andre, my mind kind of just goes back to that loss. It was against James Malkoon, where it was like a bit of a weird knockout loss. But I also feel like that kind of speaks of maybe where his chin could be at. But obviously, if you look at the other guy across him, Rodolfo Vieira, surely he's not knocking him out.
I think this is a very tough one to pick, because I think it comes down to pride in a way, because Andre Petrowski called for this fight. He called out Rodolfo Vieira because Vieira is quite frankly maybe the best grappler in this division. Those credentials are out of this world in the jiu-jitsu world. So I believe Petrowski might just be dumb enough to not do a standing bang fight here. I think he's going to take down Adolfo Vieira, try to establish top position, maybe try to get a ground and pound finish there. But it's just a very tricky game to play when you're fighting Adolfo Vieira. On the feet, I think we're going to see Petrosky win every striking exchange. Not to say Petrosky is some great striker, but we've just seen Adolfo never really improve that much as a striker. So I'm gonna pick Petrosky here. I think he's gonna grapple him early on, and then he's gonna learn that it's a little too tricky for him. So he's gonna stand with him for the rest of the fight and win striking. But he's gonna be playing with fire here, and there's a reason that Vieira is such a favorite.
Yeah, Adolfo Vieira, nicknamed as the Black Belt Hunter. If it does go to the ground, do you think there's a clear edge on the Brazilian side?
I would say not really in terms of what Petrosky brings from the physicality standpoint, the wrestling standpoint, the control standpoint. I think he might be a little better in that regard. But if it comes to the submission ability, it's for sure on Vieira's side. And we've seen Vieira get like submissions off of his back, submissions from on top. So he's going to be dangerous the whole time. But if you've seen like especially like the Mackenzie Dern fights, if she cannot get the submission, the judges are not scoring the fight in their favor because they're on their back trying to get submissions. So if they fail at getting the submissions, they're losing the round.
Yeah, this one absolutely going to be a tough one to call. I'm going to go over the Brazilian side, and I'm going to go with. I feel like it will eventually get to the ground, but I feel like we're going to see a lot of scrambles. And whoever does the better work on the feet, I do see that being Andre Petrosky getting the better work in the feet and being able to strike it as well. But I'm going to go with Adolfo Vieira via controversial split decision. How about that one?
Wow, that would be something.
And next one at 145 pounds, we've got Jose Delgado versus Conor Matthews. This one contested at 145 pounds. Two slight prospects. Jose Delgado is obviously younger of the two men at 26 years of age. He's 8-1, looking to make his UFC debut following his Contender Series fight, where he got a finish in round number 2, earned his right to be inside the UFC, and now he takes on Conor Matthews, who's 7-2, and he's coming off a loss against Denis Buzukja in his last time out. Is it another following loss after that fight, or does Conor Matthews get back to winning ways?
I'm not a believer in Conor Matthews whatsoever. He's another guy that I bring up. Lost on Contender Series. When you lose on Contender Series, I don't look at you too favorably, because if we're looking at the talent UFC brings on Contender Series these days, they're not exactly the cream of the crop. They're more so guys they find with decent records that could get some finishes. So he fought Francis Marshall, which Francis Marshall I actually do like. I do like the talent on that side, but it was an uncompetitive fight. Completely got washed out there. And Delgado, on the other hand, he's a guy I really liked on the Contender Series. He had a very high striking output, and then was able to get this knockout with a knee. So I think he's a lot more dangerous than Conor Matthews. Conor Matthews got knocked out by Denis Buzukja in his last fight. Denis Buzukja, I don't rate highly at all. He had 0 UFC wins before that, struggled in all of them. So I don't think Conor Matthews is durable, and I think Jose Delgado is going to be on him the entire time, and he's going to find a finish. You have to also factor in that he's 6 years younger, and in my opinion, he's already a more talented fighter. So I just think there's so many advantages on the Jose Delgado side. Also a 2-inch reach advantage, 3-inch height advantage. Every advantage lies with Delgado here. So you have to pick him. And I would say by knockout.
Absolutely. I like this one for Jose Delgado. Watching his Contender Series fight, he looked good. It was a beautiful knee. Round 2 stoppage. He's a moderate favorite according to Tapology, -230. I expect him to continue the momentum this weekend. Angela Hill versus Ketlin Souza in a 115-pound fight in the women's division. It's exciting to see Angela Hill still fighting in 2025, 40 years of age. Had a lot of fights inside, her MMA career, her UFC career. She's currently 12-14 inside the UFC. Off a loss against Tabifa Ricci. sort of that sort of fighter that you need to kind of fight to, to get to the top 15, top 20. You got to beat her to kind of, progress. Souza, on the other hand, she's 2 wins back to back. And most impressively, her last one against Yasmin Jagori, who, a prospect. She got the win there, rare naked choke. Now she takes on Angela Hill, where the grappling has sort of been there for Souza, but sort of has not, always been there. She dominated Yasmin, got the the rare naked choke in round 1. This one against Angela Hill, do you see that being the same situation? Angela Hill, obviously, predominantly more of a striker, looking to kind of counter punch and stay on the feet.
Yeah, this is another fight where you have the veteran versus the prospect. Ketlen Souza had a rough UFC debut, got tapped out with a leg lock, but in her last fight, she pulled off one of the best upsets in the history of the women's strawweight division when she fought Yasmin Yaragui in the Sphere Mexican Independence Day weekend. She drops her with a right hand, immediately gets her back, immediately chokes her unconscious. This was just a complete performance from her, but Angela Hill also is looking really good and is holding steady at 40 years old, which is remarkable. It goes without saying, Angela has the experience advantage, but Ketlen Souza is a little younger. But I just don't like Ketlen Souza from a technical standpoint. She's just never too technically clean out there. Always more of a physical fighter, and the UFC loves to screw Angela Hill on the scorecards. Those judges have had her losing so many splits. That's why her record is a little misleading. 14 losses there. Many of those, at least 5 of those fights she could have won if there was different judges. So I think Angela Hill wins this using the experience advantage, but there could be a scenario where Angela Hill just shows up and looks her age some days, but you never know. But Angela Hill is the pick for now, but it's a tricky one.
Absolutely. This one, tricky one to beat. I'm going on the Brazilian side. Angela Hill not getting any younger, 40 years of age. But if there is a veteran to do it, obviously had so many fights inside the UFC, very experienced, looking to obviously strike. Let's see if she could put that to the test this weekend. But I'm going to Kate Salazar. Could be a tough one. Women's fights always a tough one to call. Could be very, very tough for the judges on this night. Next one, we've got Jared Gordon versus. Actually, I believe this one might be off.
Is it off? I think you're talking about a different fighter with Jared Gordon was supposed to fight somebody else and it got pulled. That might be what you're talking about.
Let me see if I think I've just seen it pop up on my phone like not too long ago.
If you're right, I'll just give my pick anyway. The pick was going to be Jared Gordon.
His brother, UFC Seattle.
Yeah, that's what you're talking about. But as for this fight, Marsha John, we'll just call him Black Jr. Black Jr., he's the brother of the welterweight Nursultan Ruziboyev from Uzbekistan, I believe it is. We'll be honest here. That competition is abysmal. You see the record, it's 20-4. It looks good, but if you really look into it, it's not impressive. In fact, one of the guys that he fought got flagged for throwing fights on Tapology. So these are potentially fraudulent fights that he's taking part in. So I can't condone it. Jared Cannonier, on the other hand, he's just so tough, man. Every fight he really goes for it. But there's just been many instances where he does get knocked out. But since his last knockout loss, he's just gone out there and just been a complete grinder. His boxing gets better every time out. He's so persistent with the wrestling. I just think this is not a good matchup for Ruziboyev. Ruziboyev is one of these sprinters who goes out there, goes for that early kill every time. I don't know if Jared Gordon is gonna survive that, but if he does, I think he finishes Ruziboyev himself. I would say a late round 2 with a ground and pound. I just don't like Ruziboyev's background at all.
Yeah, and if you fast forward, if you do, track back a little bit, Jared Gordon was in a tough fight with Paddy Pimblett. And a fight that maybe arguably could have went his way that night if you were a judge and you were scoring. A lot of people online, a lot of fans said that it should have went obviously Jared's way, me included. I thought maybe he should have got the nod, could have got the nod, but should have, could have, would have. But now he takes on, as you talked about, Rizaboyev, and I think I think he gets the job done. I think he's got UFC experience, high caliber experience, fighting Paddy Pimblett, etc. Grant Dawson, King Green, Nasrat Hakrapas. He's fought a lot of great fights inside the UFC, and some good ones as well. Joe Selecki, Mark Madsen. So he's got some good wins under his belt. I think he beats Rizaboyev. You talked about fixing a little bit. We're going to find out this weekend. I know there's been quite a few stories of sort of fighters trying to fix their way to the UFC with records. So maybe we could sort of see sort of a similar situation. But yeah, I'm going with Jared Gordon. I think he gets the job done. I think he should be a pretty sized favorite, UFC experience. So I think he gets the job done. Next one, we got Rafael Estevam versus Jesus Aguilera. This one, battle between two prospects, 12-0 Brazilian versus 11-2 Mexican. A flyweight challenge, 125 pounds. Rafael Estevam is a great prospect, and the flyweight division is very, very. It's stat padded with loads of great prospects, and he's another one I'm looking forward to see eventually where he gets up into the top. But he's got the Mexican in front of him this weekend. I think he's going to make not easy work, but I think he's going to put on a great performance, maybe a statement victory this weekend. Oscar, who have you got this weekend?
Yeah, this fight is pretty simple. It's all about, does Jesus Aguilar get him with that guillotine? That's his signature move, is the guillotine. He's gotten so many guys with it. When you think he's not dangerous with it, he does get you with it. Esteban is undefeated for a reason. The grappling is very good. The striking is okay. I would say Aguilar actually might have an advantage with the striking, but it's not going to matter. I think Esteban gets takedowns in every round, gets a lot of control time, keeps his head out of that guillotine, and wins a unanimous decision.
Yeah, as you mentioned there, pretty easy one to pick. I'm going with Rafael Esteban as well. Next one, 170 pounds. We've got Gabriel Bonfim, the brother of obviously Bonfim that we spoke about earlier. He takes on Chaos Williams. Chaos, the Ox Fighter, obviously his nickname. If he touches you, it could be game over pretty much. He's got that power to put anyone's lights out within a few seconds. We've seen it quite a few times in the past. Obviously, Carlson Harris last time out. Miguel Beaza. Everyone knows that knockout against Abdul Razak Al Hassan. Alex Morono. But if you look at his losses against Michelle Pereira and Randy Brown, Rude Boy, two incredible fighters. Obviously, Michelle Pereira went on to crack the top 15, and Randy Brown as well. Gabriel Bonfim, 16-1. His only loss does come against Nicholas Dalby, where he did get finished via the clinch and then ground and pound. Do you see that being sort of a similar fate for the Brazilian this weekend?
Yeah, this is one of the many fights on the card where I see somebody with a physicality advantage, and Chaos Williams is all about the physicality. As you mentioned, he has his reputation for being a murderous knockout puncher. Gabriel Bonfim, he's been finished before. I'm not certain about his durability. I would say he does have the better technical striking here. He has the better jiu-jitsu, but everything we've seen from Chaos Williams is that he is able to erase every mistake that he makes in the fight with one punch. And Gabriel Bonfim, he showed me in that Dalby fight that I don't think he has like the heart of a lion necessarily. Like if things get tough, he's gonna pack up and go home. And I think Chaos Williams has the power to put the fear of God into him, quite honestly, with that punching power. And I think he finishes him in round two. One thing that does frustrate me a little with Chaos is I wish he was more active, because I think he would be a bigger star if he was fighting more often, because he'd be knocking guys out left and right. But unfortunately, his momentum has been stunted by his inactivity.
Completely agree. I'm looking forward to this one. Chaos Williams, always good to see him back inside the octagon. Sort of fighter that you don't want to take your eye off the TV for 5 to 10 seconds because you never know what it could be with Chaos. Produce some highlight reel knockouts. Let's see if he gets on this weekend. And I'm going with a highlight reel knockout of Chaos. I think Chaos Williams produces chaos inside the octagon this week, and that was pretty good, eh? Next one, we've got Vince Morales versus Elias Smith. Vince Morales, had a lot of fights inside. Well, I say a lot of, he's been inside the UFC for some time. 16-8 in his career. He takes on the newcomer, the Elias Smith, who's 7-1 in his career, off the back of a Contender Series fight. Now he takes on Morales. How did he look on the Contender Series fight? I can't remember. I can't track my mind back. I know Oscar's probably got some sort of something on his sleeve.
Yeah, Elijah Smith just got this quick knockout round 1, if I'm not mistaken. He was able to show off his athleticism in there, and Dana White did not hesitate to give him the contract. As we know, he's 22. He's about my age, which is crazy. But Vince Morales is a guy that was cut from the UFC, but he earned his way back by getting on a winning streak and got a Peruvian necktie that was very impressive. So the UFC brought him back in, but this is, if we're being completely honest, this is more so of a compassionate move by the UFC. This is not a guy that's going to enter the rankings. This is just like a pat on the back. Hey, you did good outside of the UFC. Let's give you another shot. Elijah Smith, on the other hand, has a lot more potential. But as I mentioned, he's a young guy, and young guys tend to make mistakes. They tend to get emotional out there. But I just believe that the athleticism and the speed is going to be too much for Vince Morales. Vince Morales has been finished before. I think Elijah Smith has the power to knock him out. I'll say round 1 here. I just think Vince Morales, he showed his limitations in his UFC run. He does have serviceable striking. The grappling is pretty good, but it's nothing that's going to be too much for Smith. Smith, the reason he got into mixed martial arts is his wrestling background. So I think he can defend any takedowns if need be, and on the feet use that speed to get a finish.
Yeah, I like this spot for Vince Morales. Actually, take the bat for Elijah Smith. Prospect, moderate favorite coming into this one. Talked about, obviously, Contender Series looks good, and now he looks to continue the momentum. 22 years of age, and he talks about Morales getting brought back into the UFC after a win streak on the regional scene, and that fantastic Peruvian necktie against Hunter Azure, I believe, as well. So that was a good win for him outside of the UFC. It's just doing it inside the UFC. And against Elijah Smith, I think he gets the job done. I think he's going to put on an impressive performance. A great prospect at a bantamweight that we should, keep an eye on. Another one. We have so many 135 pounds. Let's see how the Elijah Smith gets on this weekend. Next one, we have a heavyweight slobber knocker. You can't have a UFC Apex event without a heavyweight slobber knocker. This one, we've got Volta Walker versus Dontel Maines. And if I'm not mistaken, Dontel Maines is actually ranked in the heavyweight division at 11-7, ranked number 15. He takes on Volta Walker, who came inside the UFC, obviously brothers with Johnny Walker, so you might recognize his second name. The Brazilian suffered a loss against Lucas Brzezicki. He was coming off a win against Alex Nicholson against Titan FC, lost against Lucas Brzezicki, and the beat Junior Tafwa. This one for me, this is surely a pick 'em fight. It could go either way, but if I'm having confidence in someone, more confidence in someone, it's Volta Walker. Dontel Maines, don't rate him whatsoever. I think he's very sloppy. Wins one, loses one, wins one, loses one. But if you want to go off that record, did lose his last one, so maybe this is his one to win. Sorry.
Yeah, this is such a tough one to pick because, if we're being honest, these are incredibly flawed fighters. Walter Walker, he's Johnny Walker's brother, but we've had a lot of conversations about siblings being inferior with their abilities. This is another one. Does not have the athleticism, does not have the speed. He's a grappler. That's what he does out there. And he's a big guy, so he uses that weight, presses the guys up against the fence. And he can beat these low-level, very, very low-level guys, if we're being honest. Dontel Maines, on the other hand, he's a guy that trains with John Jones. I don't know what John Jones does to him, but I think John has a field day with him every day in the gym. But in the UFC, he's had moments where he looks decent. Like he's had moments where he beats guys up from the outside, looks clean. He's had moments where he out wrestles guys, but you look at him when he's getting beat up, he just looks awful, just awful every time out. The Hamdi Abdelwahab fight was horrible. That guy was 3-0 with only like bare knuckle MMA fights where he was crushing canes, and he goes out there and he takes him down every round, wins a decision. It was a horrible outing from Mace. So there's just so many red flags on both sides. I'm gonna go with Walter Walker for now, but I could change this pick like in an hour. Just no confidence here, but I think Walter Walker gets a takedown in at least 2 rounds and is able to win on the scorecards. But this could be any fight you want it to be.
Literally that. I think what you just said there, it literally could be. You could change it within an hour, 10 minutes before the fights, 1 minute before the fights, as they're shaking hands. Heavyweight division is crazy sometimes. Sometimes you get some of the best high quality fights, and then sometimes you get the worst fights inside the UFC. So it'd be interesting to see how this one plays out. Could be terrible, or we could see Walter Walker just take down Montel Maines early on and get a submission victory early and have a quick night. That could be a possibility. I'm going with Walker in what could be one of the sloppiest heavyweight fights. Especially today, because obviously I think there's only one on anyway. And so next one, we've got Julia Abdullah versus Jacqueline Cavalcanti. The Portuguese woman is 8-1. She's looking near, I know she's off 2 back-to-back split decisions. She's beat Jose Nunez and Nora Corellini. Coronel. She's 3-0 inside the UFC thus far. Julia, obviously, we've seen her face a bit more inside the UFC. 3-2, coming off a loss against Misha Tate, which was a few years ago in 2023 December. Has wins over Georgia Storienko and Gina Minarzi and Pani Kianzad. Lost at Shijari Eubanks, though, which was a bit of an iffy one. Now she takes on the Portuguese. And for me, this one, Julia is a slight underdog, a moderate underdog according to Tapology. And I'm in favour of the Portuguese woman to get it done. I think she's 3-0 thus far. I feel like what we've seen from her is just a little snippet. I think she's going to improve with every fight moving forward. I think this is a good little step up for herself. Julia hasn't really been as active in the last few years. If she was, maybe we could see a different story. Obviously, last fight was 2023. The fight before that was 2021. So the activeness could potentially kill her moving forward. Oscar, who have we got in this one?
Yeah, I got Cavalcanti here. She's a huge favorite. I would not recommend betting this fight on her because you never know. Julia Avila, she took a long time off because she got injured, and then while she was injured, she got pregnant. So she had two layoffs mixed into one. So she was out for such a long time. Horrible performance against Misha Tate. Misha Tate, we know for sure that she's past her best days, and she had a completely dominant performance from her. Got easy takedowns, and Avila never got up. Lucky for her, Cavalcanti, not exactly a grappler. She likes to strike, and she has high volume striking. And that high volume striking, in my opinion, is going to take Cavalcanti very far in this division. I could see her getting into the top 5 someday just because of her aggression out there. Avila, she was a pretty good kickboxer back then. She had some submission abilities. But I just think Cavalcanti is going to beat her to the punch. Also, you have to factor in she's 8 years younger than Avila, so I believe there's a lot of reasons why Cavalcanti is this big favorite. But with the women's MMA, you see the biggest upsets in that weight, and especially at bantamweight, you see like these crazy upsets. So the pick is Cavalcanti, but you never know what could happen here.
Completely agree. Women's division is sometimes iffy as well. 135 pounds. Looking forward to this one. First fight of the evening. Jacqueline, the Portuguese, looking to get it done. Let's see how it all plays out this weekend. That's the UFC this weekend. Let's see how the main event plays out. We've got a fantastic main event. We've got a great co-main event. Cameron Cater back, looking for redemption, looking to get back into winning ways against Eustace Salau. So is Jared Cannonier. So is Edmund Shabazian. Maybe if we rewind 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we've got some good names on this. Could be, it could be a great card. And I still think it's a great card. Still good to see them on here.
Yeah. There was a lot of conversation. I think a couple of weeks ago, people pulled up this card from Fight Island that had Dricus du Plessis, Tom Aspinall, and Ilya Taporia like in the prelims for the most part. I think it was like Tracy Cortez in the second fight of the night, Tagir Ulanbekov first fight of the night. So you never know. You really never know what some people make these drastic improvements. I remember when Dricus du Plessis came into the UFC, nobody was talking about him as a serious contender. People thought that style was never going to work, and damn, did it work. It worked really well, and now we're talking about him as one of the best middleweights we've ever seen so far.
Yeah, and potentially fighting Hamza Chimaev next, which would be a great showdown. That wraps it up, Oscar. UFC going down this weekend at the Apex. Jared Cannonier versus Gregory Rodriguez should be a great one in the middleweight division. Let's see who prevails and comes out as a victor. Let's see what happens this weekend. Oscar, always good to be joined by you. Thank you very much.
Forgive the technical difficulties, people. Hopefully it's better next time out. And hopefully we're back next week to recap UFC Vegas 102. And the week after, I'm not entirely sure what the card is, if I'm being completely blunt. But
Manel Kape.
Oh, yeah, Manel Kape versus Asu Elmabayev in the Apex. That bumps me out that Manel Kape is not fighting in front of a crowd. Because if you remember Manel Kape's fight, he dazzled the audience with those antics. He was looking cleaner than ever, more confident than ever. I always will tune in to watch that guy fight. That is appointment television every time.
Yeah, Manel Kape can produce some great moments inside the octagon. He might have lost against Mohamed Makiev, but obviously kept his job.
Certainly he did, and for good reason. And the UFC is on a roll. They've made the right fight announcements to get this fan enthusiasm up. They announced, of course, Alex Pereira, Magomed Ankalaev, Dan Hooker, Justin Gaethje, and they just announced Brandon Moreno versus Steve Erceg in Mexico City. So there's so much to look forward to on the UFC calendar, as I said at the top of the show. But that wraps it up for this episode. Make sure to enjoy the fights.
Yeah, make sure you enjoy the fights this weekend. As Oscar said, and we'll catch you all next weekend. Well, next weekend, sorry. We'll catch you all next week to obviously talk about what happened this weekend and Manel Kape as well in the main event next week. Thank you very much.